Hey, Clemson family, glad to have you back. We are going to talk about what probably will be the best position group for the Tigers in 2023, and that is the defensive line, led, of course, by a very talented defensive tackle room.
I'm Daniel Shirley. We're also going to talk about the biggest game of the year against Florida State coming up in September.
Really should be, and it's going to be early in the season. This is the Reign Supreme All Way podcast. We are glad you found us. Season 2, here we are, looking at you the whole time we're talking. I don't know if that's any better than a photo, really. The photos probably look a lot nicer, but here we are. You can see us in real time while we are chatting with you and talking the Tigers. You can find us on social media, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Threads, on Facebook, at Clemson Kickoff. We do the most updates between episode on Twitter, and you can keep up with us there. When we talk about defensive line today, we will also get into some commits. Feels like commit season is kind of winding down, but if something were to break, you'd find this talking about that on Twitter for sure. But let's get into the guys who are here, ready to go for this season. Certainly led by two guys who could be in NFL training camps right now, but instead, thank goodness, are at Clemson. We're talking about Tyler Davis, and we are talking about Rook Orororo, the two expected starters for this year.
Yeah, big shock, to be honest, that both of those guys were back. I think if you got one of them back, you'd have been really happy. But to have both of them back was a pleasant surprise for this team. And the defensive line was going to be a big turnover if those guys weren't back, because there's already some question marks at defensive end about the depth. There's some question marks at defensive tackle because of the depth, right? Those things. But to have those two guys back, I think was a big, big positive for this team going into the season. And you said it, probably the best position group on this team with those two defensive tackles. And it just loved to see the leadership from Tyler and from Rook and what they bring to this group and what they bring to the entire team.
Yeah, I hope something that Tyler Davis can add to his leadership abilities. We've talked about how he kind of keeps the room up, keeps it positive, right? But I would love to see him sort of share some of the things that make him so effective, that really enable him to be such a difference maker when he is on the field. You can just see the entire front seven is better when he is playing. And if he can sort of lead by example a little more and I have a boss who talks about training us, and it's sort of layers of paint. Every time you do something has a better chance of sinking in. So maybe Tyler Davis is going to put that final layer of paint on helping the guys around him be even better contributors than they already are. And this room is deep because you have Peyton Page back this year. You have DeMonte Capehart back this year after getting finally some impact snaps last year. Long a ballyhooed recruit, highly respected guy, just kind of couldn't get out of the tub and onto the club, as Bill Parcells kind of used to put it. Trey Williams fighting injury again, but hopefully he's back. We have seen how he can impact a game. And then a guy named Peter Woods certainly figures to crack at least that top three and maybe get onto the two deep. Should be a lot of ability to rotate bodies, keep guys fresh, keep their legs, 100% late into football games. That can be a difference maker. And you wonder how much of that is going to rest on the contributions of Peter Woods.
Yeah, Peter Woods is a name that everybody's talking about. I've had people outside of the Clemson family kind of talking to me about him, asking me about him, what he brings to the team. And I think it's everything. I could see, remember the talk about Brian Brzee, remember the talk. I don't even think the talk about Christian Wilkins was this loud going into
Right.
his freshman season. This is much higher than that. Now we know what Christian Wilkins became, but I don't think there was this much hype around him as he started his freshman season. So this young man is going to be special, and we see Rook talking the other day about it, Peter Woods bench pressing 475 pounds. I mean, you can't do that. You can't fake that, right? You have to. That has to be real. You have to be strong to be able to do that, and that will translate to the field. So really excited about him. I'm really excited about TJ Parker too. I mean, another young guy in this class who is going to have an immediate impact on this team. So, this is a deep group. It's an exciting group. And we've seen in the past when Clemson has had deep and talented and playmaking defensive lines, the difference it makes in this team. So I think that's where you start with this year's group.
You bet. And, Parker's going to have a lot to learn. He was there in the spring to go through workouts, so he's got a chance to contribute early at defensive end. You're going to need some depth there. The only really two contributors back are Xavier Thomas. So I think we all love rooting for that guy and everything that he's capable of. Uh, a highlight reel when he is able to go. And then Justin Maskell, who still has some work to do. Very lauded prospect out of Atlanta when he came to Clemson. Just hasn't quite gotten everything that you would have thought he would have had together by now. Maybe this is the year that he flips the switch and becomes another one of those guys who, like Cornell Powell or like Ryan Carter, I've discussed this before, sort of becomes, hey, there it is. That's what we knew was in him all along and what we knew he could do all along. And then you get into, the freshmen like TJ Parker, David Ojigwe, and you're also hearing a little bit about a walk-on named Armin Mason, relative of Grady Jarrett and son of NBA great Anthony Mason, for you fellow old heads like Daniel and I who remember what he's all about. Certainly a very physical dude, power forward, kind of made his name with the Knicks during some playoff runs there. He's earning some real high praise from Coach Dabo Sweeney, from defensive coordinator. Easy for me to say Wes Goodwin. Uh, who knows? I think there's one scholarship out there with TJ Dudley gone. Maybe he's going to be motivated to pick that up.
He could slide into that spot. Yeah. I mean, and, obviously that'll be a focus in the recruiting as we move forward to fill that linebacker spot. But really excited about seeing what he can bring to the team. And you mentioned Justin Maskell. Dabo talked about him the other day and said, could he be this year's KJ Henry? Right? KJ Henry was Clemson's best defensive lineman last year. He was their most consistent defensive lineman last year. Could that be Maskell this year? It really could. Guy who's been here forever, kind of okay, did contributed, but really hasn't stood out. And then maybe it finally clicks in that fifth or sixth year, right, to become a standout for that group, and then help his draft status too if he goes into the NFL. We saw what that did for KJ Henry. I didn't think he was the draft guy going into last year, and he got drafted by the Commanders. So that could be the same for Justin as well. So we'll see. But love this group. Love what we're seeing from Xavier Thomas. The leadership that you're seeing from him and these guys is really going to be a big time piece of the puzzle for this defense going into this season. We'll talk about linebackers, defensive backs later on, but I think it all starts up front for the Tigers this year.
And it has for a long time, right? And then, you've got guys, let's talk about that, right? One of the guys in line is the younger brother of Shaq Lawson, who sort of helped set that standard for that Clemson defensive line at the start of the playoff era. Younger brother Jaheim Lawson is earning some praise in workouts as well. You've also got a couple of pretty well-known recruits at the time, Cade Denoff and Zaire Patterson. You're hoping that they can kind of find their form and flip the switch. But it was noted on one of the sites yesterday or today, I forget where exactly I saw it. I wish I could credit it. I would love to. That when you look at Armin Mason, he was a guy who got into the ACC championship game and got some snaps ahead of the guys who were recruited ahead of him in Denoff and Patterson. So they certainly have the ability there. Again, it's a matter of picking it all up, going back to the install of this defense with Coach Brent Venables when he was defensive coordinator here at Clemson. There's a lot of responsibility on the defensive end. Really, you can even go back to some of the things that they were asking Corey Crawford and some of those guys before Venables got here. Some of the things they asked them to do, dropping back and I don't want to call it really a banjo. It's not what it is, but sort of that little rotation of, hey, we're going to do a safety blitz, but defensive end has to drop back and fill a gap, or corner blitz and the defensive end has to move in a different direction or maybe take a step back and try to seal that edge while nobody else is out there. That's a lot to ask a young guy to do when in high school it's pretty much, try to go get the quarterback, or if the running back gets the ball, try to disrupt him early and behind the line of scrimmage. So it does take some time. Uh, let's see how things unfold. And I do like, even though Duke, I think, will be a little bit underrated opponent in week one, you've got Charleston Southern, you got Florida and Atlantic. You should be able to rest your starters and get some of these younger guys in there, get them some valuable reps in those two games. And then even if you still want to redshirt them, you still got a couple games left in the year where you can get them out on the field. So as that all unfolds, remember to keep up with us on social media. Uh, our homepage also is clemsonkickoff.com, and we've got a widget there for a lot of college football tweets that you can pick up on directly on our homepage. Let's go ahead and get real quickly into the recruits along the defensive line, and then we'll talk about previewing Florida State. By the way, we're going to skip Duke here because it just becomes so redundant with the game coming up in a few weeks. Not a lot is going to change. So we'll preview Duke in week one before that Labor Day weekend game. But as far as the commits for 2024 signing day, along the defensive line, you're looking at Hevin Brown-Shuler, looking at Champ Thompson, you're looking at Darian Mayo, pardon me, and Adam Kasai. Mayo and Kasai have a lot of length. Thompson and Schuler, more physical dudes right now in high school, all very highly regarded. I believe Rivals has them all as 4 stars. I think Brown-Schuler is a 5-star on one of the services, if I'm not mistaken. Kasai was a late flip from Minnesota, was it? If I'm
Right.
getting that
Yep.
right?
Yep.
A lot of depth again and a couple of defensive ends, and they wanted length in those guys. They wanted guys who are tall with big wingspans, and they've found a couple.
They did, and I love the Brown-Schuler pickup. I mean, big guy, right?
Yeah.
And you and I have talked about this a lot. I think people have listened to me talk college football enough, or football in general. It starts in the middle. You have to be strong in the middle on the defense and offensive lines, and he brings another big body to this program and to this class. So this is a good group. We talked about last year's group. We haven't even talked about Vic Burley and the other freshmen who were in that class, but this will continue to continue that train coming, right, with these talented defensive linemen, and that's where you start everything up front on the defense. So love what we've seen. Do they add any more to this class? I mean, we'll see. I mean, what else is out there, right? Who is there going to be another flip like we've already seen? Clemson doesn't usually flip many guys, right? That's not been their MO. They've gotten their guys and kind of gone from there, but they got to flip in this class. So we'll see what's out there the rest of this recruiting cycle. We still got 6 months to go until signing day. So there's a lot of work to do, and we'll see what they add in this class, especially on the defensive line.
Yeah, they got those big guys in first and relatively early. I think Thompson was before Brown-Schuler, and then there was kind of a lull, and then they managed to get again their length guys in Mayo and in Kasai a little bit later. But it's been a very busy time for recruiting. That's why we're trying to catch up on this. Unfortunately, while we had the podcast kind of on pause for a couple months, really. I'm really excited about this group up front. I think they're going to be the kind of guys who you're going to see them develop, right? And if you look around at what's in house right now and the group of 6 guys that they pulled in for 2023 who are now all on campus, you don't need another group that big, more than likely. So they may be done and it's all quality. Like you're not seeing a lot of real project takes out of these guys. They're highly rated, they're well evaluated. It's going to be a good future for Clemson in the trenches between the freshmen that are on campus now and the guys who are going to be freshmen next year. Nice deep group, broad balance between the tackles and the ends. And I think the future is bright for Nick Eason and Lemansky Hall to keep Wes Goodwin happy with how that defensive line going and obviously all the way up to head coach Dabo Sweeney as well. So anything
Yeah.
else to add on those guys?
Yeah, I would add not that next year's class, but keep an eye out for Vic Burley.
Yeah.
I know we didn't talk about him very much. I saw a lot of him in high school. He's from Warner Robins, about 20 miles away from where I live. I went to a lot of his games. and he's a game changer. He is absolutely a game changer. So he might not be as an immediate impact as Peter Woods, but he is going to be a good player for this program, and can't wait to see what he can become for the Tigers.
Yep, Burley and Stefan Green and a few other guys still in reserve. They're just squeezed out of that talk for the 2 deep or maybe the 3 deep. But there is quality still around this program for sure. And I'm glad you brought up Burley, distant relative of Coach Nick Eason on that defensive line. So you had to figure he was coming here, right? You get an extra unofficial visit, I think, at the family reunion, if
Right.
nothing else. So
it
uh,
couldn't hurt. Let's just say that.
there you go. All right, well, let's segue into Florida State. I think that's the game everyone really has circled on the calendar. Like, gotta win this one. And a lot of people are saying, hey, look, if you don't beat them in September, you might be able to meet up with them again in the ACC championship game if you run the table the rest of the way. To me, you want to set that tone though right away. You want to come out hot against Duke in the opener. You want to work on the things you need to work on those next 2 games, and then be ready for Florida State, which gave Clemson a sneaky good game last year. And I've said several times, Clemson controlled the middle, probably 40 minutes of that game. FSU came out hot. Clemson stayed cool, calm, and collected, did what they needed to do, really took control of the game without question. It's hard to say that they didn't. And then that tendency last year to get up and let up, it was almost reminiscent of 2015 in a lot of ways. You saw that in a lot of those games, that ACC championship game against North Carolina and a couple of others, and even the 2016, I believe, was a ACC championship game against Virginia Tech. Like, just building a 2 or 3 touchdown lead, seeing it get down to 10 points or 7 points, and then having to pull away again. So you don't want to dig that hole against Florida State this year, led by Jared Verse on defense, another defensive lineman who really could have gone pro and could be in an NFL training camp right now had he wanted to. And then Jordan Travis on offense and a few other skill players who really have big play capability. And Clemson early and late struggled to contain Travis.
They did, and didn't seem to have the killer instinct that you
Yeah.
need to have, right? They did against North Carolina, feels like, in the ACC championship game, or they made enough big plays, to kind of put that game away. But you're right. They were in control of the game with Florida State last year and relaxed. And they didn't seem to be able to put teams away. And it made every game seem like a struggle when it didn't have to be that way. There, the South Carolina game, they got up early and couldn't put that game away. So that's got to be a point of emphasis, I think, for this year's team. But Florida State, Bill, I'll be shocked if they don't play twice this year, Clemson and Florida State. I think Florida State and Clemson are easily the 2 most complete teams in the conference. Drake May's a great player at North Carolina. He could be the number 1 pick in the draft next year. He could be the best quarterback in the country. Not denying that. They've got a great offense. But they lost Phil Longo, and they haven't stopped anybody. I think you or I could play quarterback against North Carolina, and we'd have a chance to score some points. So they don't play any defense. So I don't think they can kind of jump up into that level with Clemson and Florida State. I don't think Miami's ready for that just yet. I know that they've gone into the portal really well, but they had so much turnover on the coaching staff that I just don't think they're ready for that. Florida State is ready. If you want to name the top 10 playoff contenders for this year's season, I think Florida State and Clemson are both in that mix. And so I think they're going to play twice. And Florida State, I think, really has as much of a chance the first month of a season to make a statement as anybody in the country, because they've got LSU and they've got Clemson. And if they could win both of those games and they're 4-0 coming out of September, they might be a number 2 or 3 team in the country. They also could be 2. And it could be very difficult for them to get back into the playoff hunt. But let's say they are 2-2. I still think they'll win out. I don't see anybody else on their schedule beating them. But Clemson's got other games. Notre Dame's a big one as well. But this Clemson Florida State game feels like one of those. Remember that Louisville game when Lamar Jackson was quarterback and it was both teams were in the top 5 and I mean, it was all the focus that weekend was on that game. I'm not saying they'll both be in the top five because I think some people are overlooking Clemson, but this feels like that could be one of those kinds of games where it's a top 10 game. It'll be a primetime game, and all the attention will be on that game that night.
Yeah, and to get back to your point, if Florida State starts out 4-0, they will rocket to near the top, if not the top of the standings, because they are the darling of the preseason here in college football. Everybody who's wanting to be first to pick the next contender for the playoff is picking Florida State to be that. Despite a soft schedule last year, despite catching LSU in week one before it was really, full attack mode for Brian Kelly. He didn't have things fully installed. Some mistakes by LSU. Florida State won a close one. I think if they play in October or November, that's a very different football game. No guarantee that LSU wins it instead of losing it, but it's a very different football game, much cleaner football game. And Florida State would have to work a lot harder to win it, which maybe they would. Maybe they would answer that call and make that happen. Again, another soft schedule for the Noles after LSU and Clemson early. So it's going to be tough to know what they're made of, really. But if Clemson loses this game, it's going to be hard to get back past them in the standings and get into the playoff because everybody is going to love Florida State, keep them ranked fairly high. They are not going to stub their toe more than likely on anybody on that schedule. So it's just a question of, did they get enough guys back? Yes. Did they fill the holes that they needed to fill? Probably. It looks that way. How many times can you get it exactly right in the transfer portal and know exactly what you're getting and know exactly how they're going to perform? So that the staff there under Mike Norvell is kind of pushing the envelope on that a little bit. So far, it's making the program better. We will see if that continues to be the case with how they look this year against LSU, which I think will be very motivated in that opener, and then against Clemson when Florida State will have a lot of motivation. They can, regardless of whether they're 3-0 or 2-1, they can bring their angry face based on last year. The way they see it and the way Florida State fans around me down here in Central Florida see it is they came up short. They were the better team. They could have won. That's all pretty typical stuff to hear from Florida State people whenever they lose a game, that, oh, they were really the better team, but this or that or the other. And okay, yeah, fine. Scoreboard. Thank you. That's all it takes, right? So a lot more at stake here. I don't think you want to just say, oh yeah, we can play them again later if we have to. Well, also another question mark for me with Florida State: can the running backs be better this year? Can Johnny Wilson be a more complete football player this year? Because at 6'7", he can be a weapon on the outside with his height and with his speed. He's got to clean up some drops, and from what I hear, he's got to clean up some route running. But there is that opportunity for Florida State to really be back to Death Star mode, if you want to put it that way. And I think with a coach in Mike Norvell, who probably brings a more complete coaching set to the table than did Jimbo Fisher.
I like this Florida State team. I do. I think they've got everything you need to be in the playoff, to be a contender, right? I do. I think you've got the quarterback. They're good on the lines. They've got weapons. They are huge at wide receiver this year when they weren't last year, not to this level. So they've got everything you need to get it done. Can they beat Clemson? It's really a role reversal. Remember a decade ago, it was, can Clemson beat Florida State, and
right.
hadn't done it in forever and just could not get over that hump, and then finally got it done and then went on a run. Now it feels like this is Florida State's turn to see if it can get over that hump. And we'll see in September and probably again in December in Charlotte. Can't wait to see that game. It's going to be a big one. Can't wait to see it in person. Really excited about it.
Without getting into this reporter or that reporter or the other, I kind of get the general sense that a lot of people are ready for Dabo Swinney to no longer be atop the ACC, to no longer have a place in the playoff conversation. And I think a lot of people are catching on to the Florida State bandwagon as a result of that and saying, yeah, they kind of want this to happen. Here's the team that's capable of doing it in the Seminoles under Mike Norvell. Am I crazy, or do you kind of pick up on that once in a while, just overall across national media as well?
Well, I think Florida State has been the hot topic of the ACC this offseason, other than the R word that we're not talking about during this podcast.
Carolina.
Yeah, we're not talking about that today. I think Florida State has been the hot team. I was surprised Clemson was the favorite by the ACC media to win the championship. I
Yeah,
thought for sure that Florida State would be, and if you vote Florida State as the favorite, I'm not gonna have a bone to pick with that. There are reasons to pick them. They've got, like we just said, everything you need to win it. And I do think there is some Dabo fatigue out there. If you don't like the way he does things, then hey, I'm ready for this guy to move on. That's okay. We've seen that before. We've seen that with Nick Saban. I'm sure we'll see it with Kirby Smart. When somebody wins a lot, people get tired of it. So, but I look, I don't think Clemson's going anywhere. I think Dabo made as good a hire as was made in the offseason with Riley to come in to run the offense. I think that was maybe a program changing hire for Clemson because it felt like things had gotten stale on offense. That to me changes this program moving forward, especially this season. I mean, imagine the questions we'd have about Clemson right now if they hadn't made the change that they made,
yeah,
and that people thought Dabo wouldn't make too, right? Remember? And even you and I talked about that. Is would he make that kind of a change? It didn't feel like he would, and he did. So, look, I think these are two great teams. Can't wait to watch them play. I think they're two of the top 5 teams in the country. I know a lot of people don't see it that way, but that's the way I'm looking at it going into this season.
yeah. I'll get real quick, and we won't go deep into this, and we got to wrap up as well. But uh, two things I'm going to be looking for, I think, going into this game. We'll see if it changes by the time we do another preview ahead of week 4. K. Klubnik, how is he going to protect the ball while still running that rally offense with tempo, while still making sure that they dictate the pace of the game and how the game is played against the defense rather than taking what's given to them? And then the other thing is going to be those defensive ends or whoever is going to be setting the edge for Clemson to make sure that Jordan Travis stays contained uh, a greater percentage of the night than he did last year. Anything else?
Yeah, I'm ready for it to get here. Right. I'm really excited about the Duke game. You don't want to look past the Duke game, but that to me is one. If you're a college football fan, that's one you have circled on your calendar. I don't care if you're a Clemson fan or a Florida State fan or a fan on the West Coast, Stanford or Cal, maybe. You should have that Clemson and Florida State game circled on your calendar because that's going to be a big one.
Absolutely. Well, we will continue these position by position and opponent by opponent previews in our next episode. And until then, I'm Bill Zimmerman.
I'm Daniel Shirley. Go Tigers.